appreciate
Yeah,
it.
what's the theme? What are we doing?
Yeah, so the theme is understanding sort of people's core values or like who they are and how that
Okay.
impacts what they do. So
Okay.
I want to thank you because you are the first sort of entertainer that I have
Okay.
on this podcast. Because almost everybody else I've had thus far, and I actually did a former CEO this morning. It's either like CEOs or other professional coaches. So
Okay.
this is sort of expanding what we're trying to do, and it's really understanding sort of who people are on this core values journey and how it impacts what they do.
Okay.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, so we're gonna figure out what my core values are? Or am I
Well,
supposed
yeah.
to already
Hey,
know?
listen, that would be pretty cool. I'm sure you probably have a pretty decent idea what they are now, anyway.
Yeah.
Do you actually, or do you, have you
Don't
really
know.
just
We'll see.
really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, let's talk about it. Do you sort of what do you think about core values?
I don't know. Tell me. What is like I mean, are we looking at the dictionary definition or is there some book that I haven't read about this?
No, I mean, at the end of the day, core values are really, and I don't want to oversimplify it, but core values are just sort of those beliefs, the feelings, and thoughts that you have that are central to who you are and drive your behaviors.
Hmm.
And what we know is that a lot of the times people have core values, but they're not really conscious of it or they're not really cognizant of it. And
Yeah.
then when they get into like conflict or issues with somebody, what they don't realize is that it's rubbing against some core value that they have that they're not realizing. So the
Okay.
byproduct of that is like anger, frustration,
Yep.
could be excitement, whatever it is. People identify the result, but they don't go like deep enough to understand what that is, if that
Okay.
makes sense.
Okay. Well,
Right.
this is
So,
good because we just came from couples therapy, so we're talking
are
about
you
the
kidding
same
me?
things. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think core values are foundational to what anybody does, and
Right.
we do things through the lens of our core values, whether we realize it or not.
Okay.
And when you've got a realization of what those core values are, if you always go back to them, you can never sort of go wrong with yourself, if
Right.
that makes any sense.
Yeah, sure. Sure. Okay.
And I was listening to Hinged, which by the way
Yeah.
came out 800 pound gorilla that came out,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Well, I did it with the laugh button and 800 pound together.
Okay.
And um like I don't even know what the difference is or why I needed both of them, but I guess one was more PR based and the other was more. And so the laugh button, the PR based one, they dissolved as a company um for comedy, the laugh button. So 800 pound like wanted to just put it out there more because I guess their site is kind of dead, that laugh
Nice.
button. So that's what happened. So yeah, we'll get another little boost. It's good, always good.
Yeah, did you just release that? It was like I saw it was like 5 days ago or something.
Yeah, they re-released it on the 15th. So yeah, not
Nice.
bad. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good stuff. But listening to that, there's a lot of things that came through.
Okay.
Um, and I think for me, what I heard was sort of authenticity, family, right? A lot of sort of things that I thought were very interesting. And I was kind of thinking, I was trying to figure out from your perspective, what was it that resonates with you with the material? Like when you dig down and you write, what's coming up for you?
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, because well, like I don't know if we discussed this ever as a comedian in New York. Um, when I first moved here, I had a lot more observational stuff. Um, but when I started going out like every night, and being on these shows with five, six, seven, eight other comics, I was worried or actually overlapping in too much material with
Hmm.
other people. Or I don't know if I was worried about it or it was happening, but the one thing I knew is if I keep writing personal stuff, then even if I'm doing the same subject as someone else, it's going to be my own life, my own take. And, you know, it's as simple as something when something huge goes on in the news, you know, you could have a joke about that, but there's a good chance 3 or 4 other comics are also. And so not only did I want to be just original in general, but it felt like I was going to be repetitive or overlapping with too many other comedians. And that was one aspect of it. And the other aspect was when I started New York City, as a coming from Boston, where I would be doing comedy, on a good week, like 4 times. That would be the best amount of shows. You could do that 4 nights, 4 times in a night in New York. And
Depending on,
so,
but no, you might be doing it on the same block.
yes, exactly. So it was like if I wasn't invested in the material, if it wasn't about something that was important to me, then it was hard to talk about it so many times each night. And so those were the two reasons why I became even more personal. Um, and then that ended up being a self-fulfilling prophecy kind of world, because I ended up speaking so much about being single and alone, um I remember there was one night where I had a set and I got off stage and I looked at the manager and I was like, they owed too many times. They
Uh,
were like, oh, I was like, that's not what I'm looking for. I'm not looking,
the road of death.
who's getting sad almost. And I remember doing a benefit up in Rochester, New York, and my friend, this woman who I had started with doing comedy. I remember we were on the benefit together, and we hadn't seen each other in a while. Um, Marianne Sirk, and she afterwards she was like, "Oh, what are you gonna do if you ever do get married or in a relationship and have some kids? Like, your whole act is about, I mean, great job, but
Right, right, right.
your whole act is about being single." Um, and I was like, I guess I'll retire. I don't know. But, you write more of what you know. So, yeah, I guess, yeah, there was a lot of, um, that's a long way of saying when I sit down, yeah, it's a lot of like, um, my personal life, and that is, was wanting a family, wanting love, wanting security and stability in this world that I don't have it.
Mm.
That stand
What
up
was
world
driving
where,
that, you think?
um, I don't know. I mean, I always wanted something more than what I was doing. Like I liked, I grew up, my parents are still together. I grew up, enjoying that life of being in a family, the security and the you know the love, and I guess I also love doing comedy. That was my favorite thing. I remember when I first started doing it, and I was like, I will travel wherever I need to go to do this thing as much as I can. Um, and then I think I did. I started getting lost in that, where it was like, I would start to have these relationships, and I would start to um, see people, and things were going well, and too many of those interruptions happened. I'm out of town. I need to work on this weekend. I can't meet you for this particular date because I'm working tonight, you know? So those things that were like kind of ha ha funny originally really became a difficult thing at a certain point, and still is, because I still do have, really to block out those times with my wife. It is a considerable hurdle at times, that nights and weekends thing. You know, there's plenty of advantages of it too, but it's hard to see when you know when you still have the the difficulty from it as well.
It is kind of an ironic thing because when most people are relaxing, that's when you get to go to work.
Yeah, yeah,
Right? So that downtime that most people have is when
yeah,
you're really sort of active and busy. So
sure.
it makes it tough if you're outside of the sort of entertainment community for most people to sort of embrace that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, are there constant themes that come up for you when you write?
Yeah, I mean, it's like a lot of people say, where do you get your material, or where, um, what's your inspiration, and it always ends up being like what you're interested in, or some people will even take it further, like what pisses you off, what bothers you, what makes you angry,
Right.
um but yeah, for me it's always just what's interesting to me. Like I know, like even when it is some material that I is not specifically about me, it becomes about me, because I remember having a bit about that documentary Staircase, you know that guy who like
That's
was
in
he's
Hinged. If people want
yeah,
to check,
that's in
yeah.
him, right. So sure, it's about him, and then but you can kind of reel it back to like if that was me, or you know what I mean. um but that's just it's something that's interesting to me. And so that's what ends up coming out when I sit down to write. I will write, it's there's two parts of writing for me, which is like I'm in my daily life and something happens and I jot that down, or I email myself like idea, you know, this happened. And then you sit down with it and write about it. And then there's the sitting down with nothing, with no note, and trying to create it out of thin air, which is just more of like writing about the day
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the life.
Well, what's interesting is and one of the reasons why I love your work is that you definitely have a point of view. Like you're right, there's a lot of comics who have a lot of parallel thinking, right? But it's that point of view that really sort of accentuates and I think connects with people, right? So that's the other thing I think that happens with values, core values, is that once you have yours, you have a conscious understanding of yours, you're able to sort of connect easily with others, and you connect very well. I don't know if you do this consciously or unconsciously, but it's something that and if by the way, if people haven't seen you in person and live and they've just seen the special, they got to go catch you in person, because comedy in real life is a different experience, and I'm not sure
Sure,
people
yeah,
realize that.
for sure.
So the
I mean,
connection you
Chris
have
Rock
there.
always said something about like everything he does was something like everything he does like on TV or film is to get people to come see him live, because that's what stand-up's all about,
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I have a tough time watching a lot of specials because it's not the same. You don't get
Right.
the same
Sure.
energy. I mean, you can get like I can get a laugh when I'm watching Netflix or something else like that. But when
Sure.
I'm in the room, it's a completely different experience. It's a different set of emotions that come up,
Absolutely.
and whoever's on stage gets to really craft that and really give it punch, and that's the missing element that happens, I think, when you're watching it sort
For
of through
sure. And I
TV.
think people are still trying to master it. It's a different production that comes across well on TV than it does live. If you took what you think is a perfect, great night of comedy and then put that on TV, that same thing doesn't come across. It needs to be a little more produced, and um, and I think sometimes it was overdone in the past on some of these like Comedy Central shows where they like kind of like pumped in a lot of laughter,
Yeah,
and so it
yeah.
was almost too produced. Where I remember like they clapped after every joke because the audience was so amped up. you know. And I remember when I did my first album, I was doing it at this amazing club that was just so hot in Ottawa, Absolute Comedy, and I, usually your hottest show is like Saturday night first show. They're
Right,
like,
right.
and I ended up having to use like a Thursday show because the Saturday show was too good. It sounded like I just had everybody I've ever met in the audience just like gushing too much. It was like, all right, let me get the next joke out, which was fine in the moment, probably because you're having fun, but it sounded inauthentic,
Oh,
which
that's
is sometimes
interesting.
what I would see on, overproduced comedy specials. Yeah.
Yeah, well, a lot of times I think, especially earlier specials,
Yeah.
and I unfortunately I'm like a student of this stuff, right? So you watch it, and then all of a sudden, every different. Sometimes you get a different view, and it's different people in the front row.
Yes, yes,
right?
yes.
Or maybe the comedian is just wearing maybe a slightly different. The shirt is slightly different
Yeah,
for some reason. You
yeah.
realize that they're
It's
taping
so
different
funny.
shows, which is
And it's crazy because I mean that's in everything. And I
yeah.
didn't, I don't do a ton of acting, but well, the other day I was watching a show. I think it was, I don't want to mention the name if in case it wasn't it, but there was a scene where a guy had just incidentally had a a bowl of or a thing of like movie popcorn, and it was filled like he just got it for the first 3/4 of the scene, and then the last part of the scene, it was down below. And I noticed it. I had to back up and notice it, and it's just it's funny because that is I like I said, I don't do a ton of acting. I have a friend who's a amazing screenwriter and TV writer, and he produced an Apple TV show um recently, and he had me do like it was like a kid's show, and he had me come in and be a teacher in a scene, and it was so interesting. I was just so incidental, I think I had a line, maybe two, and I, the amount of time that was taken for this like extra almost, incidental person in the scene of taking pictures of what I was wearing and making sure I was wearing the same exact thing, and like my glasses were, on, not off. My tie was, to like someone's job is that all day to make sure those, and it still doesn't always happen because it is, you know, who knows how many times they took that scene, that
Yeah.
popcorn scene, that could have been a day of shooting, so something slipped through the cracks. It's a lot of work.
It is crazy. So I've done some commercial work, and I remember the first commercial I did, and like you said, I wasn't too savvy on the production part of stuff, but they had guys, and a lot of the team, they were wearing like iPhones on their belts, and
Okay.
the iPhones looked like they were just flashing all the time. And what I didn't realize until later in the day or after, they have something for continuity. So whatever it is takes like pictures all the time, and they go
Yeah.
back and they review stuff. So like even if somebody moved from a desk, they want to make sure that the books and the flowers are exactly the
Yes.
same.
Right.
And I remember I was in I did one scene for another commercial, and I put my own jacket on, and the AD freaked out.
Yeah.
And at first I thought he was like yelling at me, like, why is he yelling at me that I put my jacket on? He's like, take it off, blah, blah, blah. And then he's like, wardrobe. And I was like taken aback by that. And he explained to me later, he's like, listen, I wasn't yelling at you. He says, their job, like you were saying earlier, their job is to make sure that everything fits on you perfectly. And it's exactly how it was when
Yeah.
we filmed you 2 hours ago. And we know
Yeah.
it's 2 hours ago. So they're experts in that. You don't do that.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
was like, oh my God. It was
Yeah.
kind of wild. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think people don't underestimate what happens behind the scenes,
Yeah.
and that was just those are just for a couple commercials.
Right.
I can't imagine
Yeah.
movies and stuff like that. It's good stuff. So like back to sort of that core value stuff.
Yeah. So I do remember like, kind of, being getting to the point where it wasn't a joke anymore.
What do you
At
mean?
first, like I had jokes about how, it's hard to be, single. I'm getting older. I'm dating divorced women. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. Um, and it was like, ha ha, funny. Don't worry, John. Everything will be okay. To the point, then it kind of shifted to a point where I was like, no, this isn't just happening. Like, I need to make this happen, you
Mm,
know? And I started kind of focusing on it more in therapy. And I have a friend who is, I don't know if you know Jessica Brodkin.
no.
She's a, she was a CIA agent, a Reiki healer, and a stand-up comic.
Oh,
She
that's
still does,
awesome.
yeah, she does stand-up and Reiki now, energy healing. Um, and I remember going to her once. We did a healing, and I remember like voicing like, I was at the point just I was voicing like that, yes, I love this life where I go and I do stand up, almost every night when I'm performing, but it's getting um, it's not feeding the other thing that I want in my life, which is a family. And I had just like kind of a picture of like I don't care if I have to, move to like the suburbs in New Jersey and
Careful what you wish
come in,
for.
and there it is. It just it and like it happened, and I started um talking to a therapist specifically about that, um and really like honing in on what I wanted when I was dating, because I was kind of dating, you know, who's still in the nightlife scene because that's who I can date right now. I'm getting old. It's like that Matthew McConaughey joke from Dazed and Confused, but like, I'm getting older, but the my dating pool was still the same
Yeah, yeah.
age,
Well,
and
especially the work that you do. I mean,
yeah,
that's the population that you're surrounded by.
yeah. And so it was really about about, you know, dating with intention, Yeah. Because dating had always been for me like just like a fun thing that I did,
Yeah.
and hopefully, you know, the the marriage and the kids would come later and it would be fine. And it was getting to the point where it's like, no, it's not just gonna happen. I have to like really focus on this and do it. And it really did kind of flip a switch when I did that. And it and my wife came to me. I put that in quotes to you just now because we are still not married. My joke is that my wife wants to have. I refer to her as my wife always. We say that we're married, but we're not. But I joke that we want to have a wedding, but I keep knocking her up, and she wants to have a drink at her wedding. So
Nice.
yeah,
So what was the learning that came out of that process about, like, for you personally? What did you learn about
as
yourself?
far as well, as far as what?
Like when you went through that process and you were looking at what was happening in your professional life versus your personal life. So you said you
Mm.
went to talk to a therapist. So what were some of the learnings that came out for you that made you shift?
Um, I guess some of the things that the therapist and also my friend, the healer, the healer kind of went in, okay, and she said, she's like, well, there's nothing blocking you.
Oh, that's interesting.
There's nothing like trauma that you don't know about. There's no, yeah, there's no thing there that's blocking you. It's you. You're blocking you. So what are
Wow.
you blocking? Yeah. And I kind of learned with the therapist that it was my insecurities about being a provider. I could, as a non-famous stand-up comic, a working comic, I could support myself. I never took any vacations. I took one vacation to Italy because a friend of mine had a house there and kept inviting me. And one time she came and she invited me, and the dates that she told me happened to be when my brother and his family were going to be there for his father-in-law's. I think it was either a big birthday for his father-in-law or a big wedding anniversary for them. And and I was like, you know what? I am going to go do that. And it was like, other than that, it was like summer vacations that my family in Boston we went to Cape Cod every year in the summer. That was I never like, so it was like a life that I was living, but not, I don't know, what's the phrase, like living out loud or something. It wasn't like I was really living, I
Yeah,
was
yeah,
getting by
yeah.
in
It,
life.
it, it sounded like you had, what sometimes I refer to like a belief about yourself, that,
Okay.
you wouldn't have, you're not that secure enough to be a provider. Well, who's to say that, right?
Right.
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 And sometimes that stops people. It's interesting as we're talking, like family definitely seems to be something that's very important to you. And not only that, but there's like when we talk and when I see you on stage and I see you perform, there's like an authenticity that comes out about who you are. And some of that I think is sort of like care. Like I don't know if that makes sense, but
Sure.
you have this empathy and care for others, and it's not just me who realizes it. So there's other people that just that talk about you, like behind your back in a good way,
Oh,
right?
geez.
Like
Okay.
he's, you know, he's a really great guy. I mean, like one of the first times we ever met, you didn't know me from Adam, and we had coffee, and you were talking to me about things, and you know, you brought me up into the Fat Black. You know, you introduced me to some folks, and there was this energy that came out of you that was a lot different than a lot of other people in your circle, right?
Hmm.
Without, you know, and you probably, you know those type of people. So care seems to be something that really exudes from you. I don't know if that makes sense or if that resonates.
Sure. Yeah. I remember like because I yeah, because it became like an intern thing. I remember like audiences when I first and before I forget, um family is important because that and it was a big commonality that came up on my first date with my wife. We both were talking about how important family was, and so that always stood out to me. But as far as the care thing, I remember like part of my thing was always about being single and looking, and people would come up to me after and be like, "Oh, I really hope you find someone," and I would get set up a lot, you know. And then I was like, "Oh, am I gonna lose that kind of um, connection that I'm having with the audience sometimes when I'm in a relationship?" And now when I started like talking about my wife on stage, I would have those same people that were like, "Oh, I know somebody for you," or or like maybe vibing with someone. I was getting more of and I was getting oh, she sounds amazing. When do we get to meet her? You know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. So yeah, I guess it is there. Yeah, I guess I understand what you're saying with that. Yeah.
Yeah, listen, if it doesn't resonate, then tell me I'm full of shit. But I mean,
Yeah.
these are definitely things that, and sometimes, you know, a lot of times when I work with folks and stuff like that, it's almost just holding up the mirror to them,
Yeah.
right? So it's just bringing that conscious that's aware, and it's really rooted in the behaviors, right?
Sure.
Because a lot of times core values, people, you know, oh, my core values are X, Y, and Z, and it's just words.
Right.
But you got to get behind the words and what is the behavior, what are the actions that are driving those things. That's really what happens.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of times people project what they think is important to them, you know, without really sort of doing the deep work and understanding how is this impacting me and is it really manifesting what I want,
Right.
if
Sure.
that makes any sense.
Sure. Yeah.
So what's coming up next for you? You know, you've got the 800-pound gorilla that's out.
Yeah. Um, yeah. Well, right now I'm just sort of I've kind of taken a little bit of a step back with performing. You know, I'm still out there like 3, 4 nights a week. And we with the little one are so I we have a daughter, she's 3.5, and the boy is like a year and a couple months. And so we're just in it, you know. And it seems like every time I turn around and be like, all right, I'm going back in full, something else happened, you know. So right now the thing is we're moving at the end of this month into a house. So that's exciting, but that's taking up a lot of energy, obviously, a lot of stress, a lot of energy. And, but, you
Yeah.
know, you get a lot of writing and get a lot of material out of that. So that's good. So the next thing right now for me, when I hop back in, which hopefully will happen when the dust settles literally at the house, is to, you know, start focusing towards the next album as well as putting out another podcast of my own. I've done two in the past, you know, and enjoy
Which were
that.
great.
Thank you so much. So yeah, that seems to be the next way to go, just with getting the creativity out there because it's hard for me now. Like I've never loved being on the road. It
Um,
feels real isolating to me. And now it's even worse when I'm missing the kids and family, you know? So anyway, I can try to transition to like being here as much. That's why I've sort of taken a step back just to be here for bedtime, just to, you know, I'll still go out, you know, to a handful of clubs that I love, um, that are longer than a day or two. But mostly, if I'm traveling, it's a day or two. and then I'm back.
Well, see, this is again another example of how your values are manifesting in your life. The importance of family, the importance of being there for bedtime, the importance of having that connection
Sure.
with your family it's
Sure.
completely resonating. So if it's one thing that would be really curious is if you sort of looked at some of those other things and see what else is coming up for you from a values perspective, because that's whether you realize it or not, that's definitely driving some of the things that are
Yeah.
action,
No,
like
absolutely.
in the tank, that podcast you had.
Yeah.
That's another example where I almost feel like there is care and share that's coming out of that, because that
Yeah.
was like a great podcast. And for people who don't know it and who are comedy fans and who appreciate the art of it, if you go check out In the Tank, I think it's still up on Apple. I still have it here.
There's a few.
And
Yeah.
yeah, that's some good stuff there.
Yeah. It's funny because I remember when we started doing that, the great photographer, comedian, photographer Mindy Tucker, she was like, "What you're doing is sort of similar to what I'm doing." I'm like, I'm showing them, I'm taking, a comics picture from that moment in time for them, and you're doing that with the comedians. You're like taking a snapshot of their career at this time and putting it out there. And it's funny because yeah, we did. I was talking with somebody the other day about it would be cool to do like because those were like 2009, 2010, 2000, somewhere around there. It would be funny to do a redo or not a redo, just interview the same people,
Oh, that'd be really
you
cool.
know, this many years later. But I mean, some of them, I mean, we had Hannibal Buress, Todd Barry, Amy Schumer, um, you know, Nate.
Yeah, but yeah.
Nate Bargatze would always joke with me. He was like, "I'm just happy I was the only, I did two. He was like the only comic that did two."
Well, you can get Vecchione to pull him in and see if
Yeah.
you
Well,
guys can do
Vecchione was
something.
one of our last ones, actually. I
Yeah.
remember. And I was
Well,
actually, we were starting to do something else with him where we were going to follow him around, which is something that people do now. But we were going to follow him on a night in the city, working out one joke at many different places.
oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's really cool. It's funny you talked about. And I was thinking about Vecchio when you said this. You talked about being the insecurity of being a comic and being able to provide. I can't remember if it was an interview or a podcast where I think he was talking with Attell, and Attell was like, "Listen, it's not like you've got to be the Chappelles of the world. You can make a very good living, provide for yourself and others doing this work. You don't have to be." The top A list. There's
Yeah.
still plenty of amount of work, and you can almost see and hear in his voice like a lifting of
Yeah.
pressure,
Yeah.
which was
Yeah.
kind of cool. But I
Yeah.
think in this business, as in any other ones, it's just sort of establishing yourself and then
Yeah.
finding that path.
Well, because that's a thing like that making it thing, that making it thing, or when you start to talk to other people where they're like, my like I remember I was somewhere and my friends were at the show and then I think I went to their house app the next day for some sort of event and they kept introducing me as their famous comic friend and I was like, these people don't know I am. Obviously, I'm not famous. Like it's okay to be where I am, which is like, yeah, I'm a very good comedian that performs a lot, you know. But yeah, so it's like, what is making it?
Yeah, that's a great
And
question.
yeah, you know,
Well, because there's so many comedians who crush
yeah,
that most people never hear of.
sure,
Right. But I think there's still an opportunity to monetize what they do and have an amazing living
yeah,
doing that.
yeah,
Right. You don't have to be Kevin Hart. Right.
right,
So there's a lot of other people who can do that. And it is a tough business, obviously, but what isn't?
right.
Right. So,
I was somebody was putting something up about how I think it was Mike Racine was saying something about because he also does moving. He's like a mover,
oh,
and
right.
he was on the road, and he was like being on the road. Like he made it sound like this is like a vacation. You know what I mean? I hate when comics complain about a 6 a.m. flight or something like that. It's like I just was on a moving truck for 14 hours. That's
Yeah.
hard work.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is what it is. I mean, there's always going to be politics and complaining and everything, but it's good to have a perspective on it.
Well, and also, I think what I see from a lot of comedians is that they're actually, living the dream, as they say. And I always say that
Right.
people say, "How you doing? I'm living the dream." Well, there's more to that, and there's not a lot of people who have the guts to do that. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but there's this company called Gallup, and they do a lot of surveys,
Hmm.
and they survey a lot of people in workforces. And over the last over 10 years, consistently the number of disengaged or unhappy people at work is like 70%,
Yeah.
which is it's
Yeah.
that's really horrible.
Yeah. Yeah.
70% of the people you're working with can't would probably want to jump out the window. That's
Yeah.
like crazy.
Yeah. I mean, we have that I mean, my wife works really hard. She's an event planner. You know, there's like a jealousy that she has that like, you know, I have to watch my tongue kind of when I complain about my work because it's like it's, 75% fun, you know?
Yeah, but people don't understand what that other 25% is, the
Yes, they
torture
do
to come up
not.
with that.
They do
Yeah.
not. And I was being generous. It's probably 50-50. There is like
Yeah.
traveling can suck, sitting down to write the material can suck. The there's an illusion that the show is the work. Like that 50 you worked for an hour tonight for 50 minutes. You
Yeah.
worked for 20 minutes twice tonight. It's like, yes, but the amount of anxiety and and effort that goes into the performance is it takes its toll.
It can be, yeah. And I will just tell you, even just doing these podcasts. So I actually
Sure.
did one earlier this morning. Um, and the same thing would happen when I used to do the stand up and when I did some of the acting stuff. You're right, that anxiety piece just like ratchet is. And there's no rationale or reality of it because I know as soon as I get into it, I tend to calm down. I get into it. I
Yeah.
get more presence. But that time leading up to it, it's almost like I want to cancel it. I don't want to do this. Why am I
Yep.
doing this? This is
Yep.
the stupidest thing in the world.
Yep.
And it almost takes everything that I have to sort of get through that,
Focus on it. It's yeah, I mean you could
that
put it
call
under
time.
the category of preparation, it's for the preparation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and one of the things I learned in acting school, and this is stuff they never teach you in like school
Mm-hmm.
or just life. I mean, and I went to acting school later, like in my 40s,
Mm-hmm.
which was kind of crazy. And I had this amazing acting teacher, Jennifer Monaco at William Esper Studio. She's unbelievable. And what she sort of drilled into us was like, listen, you do all the prep work, you do all the hard work, and then what has to happen? She's like, you have to let it go. You do all the prep, all the material, you get all your stuff ready. And then when it's time to go, what you have to do is let it go and trust that when you've done your process, when it's ready, it's going to be there.
Yeah.
Right. But that is, easier said than, than done.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
I've been
No,
doing
it
that.
is. I did a corporate show recently that was set up to be good, but we and they do the show every year. So I remember they were showing me the room that we're gonna have the show in during the day. They showed it to me, and I was like, "Oh, this is great. Looked great. The seating, the plan was great. Um, the stage." And I was like, "Do you want to do a quick sound check?" And they're like, "Nah, we've never had a problem." And sure enough, one so it was basically four quadrants, and the two side quadrants they couldn't see so well, so they even had TVs, screens up for them to see. One quadrant, the speaker was out, and so they were one of the quadrants that had to look at the TV, so they weren't in the room completely as it was. Ruined half the room because half their conversations and their noise disrupted the next quadrant. So I was pretty much performing for an attentive half of the room
Yeah.
and a progressively less so on the other side, but it was so distracting and loud that it probably didn't seem that way, but it took all 25 years of my experience to make that a good show.
Wow.
You know,
Yeah.
it,
See,
it
and this is the
took
other thing people don't realize about a comedian is that the experience and the effort and the skill that it takes to do that.
it takes a lot and it why it's deceiving is that when you're doing it well, it looks so easy.
Yeah.
because it takes a long time to become yourself on stage, but that's what you are. You're yourself on stage. And so I always thought that was a very interesting thing about New York City showcases. Because I came from Boston where there was kind of like this thing of like, all right, we'll do a show. If it's a showcase, like we'll put the newest person on first and the second newest on first, second, it got progressively. And then there'd be like a veteran headliner or something like that doing a little bit more time at the end or whatever it was. In New York, it was just say there's six comics on the show. It's six 10-year plus veterans in those slots. And I was like, this audience can't appreciate how hard it is because everybody's so good. And it sort of took away a little bit of the respect, I think. The audiences, it was just subtle. It was very subtle because I think if someone came up that was a little newer that you could tell, was working a little hard, it maybe the audience would be like, oh, okay, let's like pay a little more attention. And
Yeah,
um,
yeah. Well, I
it,
think people, you're
it
right. People are spoiled, I think, from a New York City perspective. And
yeah,
showcase, for those who don't know, showcases where there's multiple comics on a list and they just sort of keep going. They typically
yeah,
have 5 to 10 minutes each
yeah,
as they go. But the New York City scene, and I'm sure it's like this way in larger cities in LA, but I don't know if they do a lot of showcases in LA.
yeah, they do.
Yeah, but the level of quality that comes out and is unbelievable. So one of the things I loved was like New Joke Night
Yeah,
at Fat Black, where people are sort of just crafting, right? That is sort of like, again, this is probably the nerdy stuff about comedy, but you get to see almost like that trajectory of how it comes out. So like if you were following Vecchionte, if you did that, like to show the
yeah,
joke, that would
yeah,
be super
yeah,
cool. I think a lot of
yeah,
people would really get value out of that.
yeah, yeah. It's definitely interesting for people that are into comedy, and um, that's what um is interesting. The reason why that happened was that the Comedy Cellar there was always kind of like this unwritten rule in all the city clubs that like you could work out your material during the week and then on the weekend you brought
Bring
it
the
because you were
A.
getting
Yeah.
paid a little more, the audience was paying a little bit more. And then it got to this point, I think, down at the Comedy Cellar where like Tuesday night was a Saturday night because everything was sold out and popping, and nobody wanted to lose their standing at the club, by having a bad set, by trying new material and stuff. And so it became this thing that, like, unless you were, Amy Schumer, Aziz, Chris, Colin Quinn, Norton, unless you were these like Judy Gold's, level comedians, you couldn't try out new material on any night. And I think
Yeah.
Will Sylvance sort of saw that and wanted to give, the rest of us an opportunity to try out new material. And I think that's why that came about.
Well, I remember I started going to New Jake for multiple reasons. One, it was a lot cheaper,
Okay.
right? It was cheaper to get a ticket, and I was doing a lot of stand up and trying to do a lot of stand up in the city, so it was almost like a master class to see them,
Right.
right? Because a lot of times,
Right.
I mean, I don't know if you remember your early days, but when you watch somebody else who's a master at a craft, you can see their process and you can understand, okay, maybe I'm not a complete screw up and I
Yeah.
can do this.
Yeah.
So and earlier on, it's not like they were super packed shows. A lot of
Right.
times, certain clubs in the city, as soon as shows go up, they sell out. And I
Yeah.
remember for New Joke, was typically Thursday nights, I believe.
I think they
Um,
moved, whatever it was. I think it's Monday now.
yeah, or they had Monday, and I think he might have had 2 nights. I don't know, but
Okay.
this is like pre-pandemic and
Yeah.
everything else. I was going to the shows, and it was easy to get in. Sometimes I didn't even have to, buy a ticket online. But then, like right before the pandemic, I mean, I remember sitting there with Sean Donnelly. That little table that you used to have
Yeah.
before you go into the left there, and it would
Sure.
just be like packed
Yep.
for New Joke, and we're like, what the heck is going on? But
Yep.
it sort of caught on,
Yep.
and I think people sort of started to figure it out, and
Yeah. And they're doing them at other clubs now too. A lot of I've heard a lot of, yeah. The New York Comedy Club does one. I think West Side Comedy Club does one. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, Broadway, they just call them open mics.
Yep.
And Big Al.
Yeah. Sad.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's
Al Martin.
unfortunate. Yeah,
R.I.P. Yeah.
it was one of the first places I started going to was Broadway. So
Yeah.
that's a whole other story.
Well, New York Comedy Club, I was telling my wife when I was trying to explain who Al was, because Al, he was the original owner of the New York Comedy Club.
Was he really?
Yeah. The,
Oh, I didn't. I thought he was just had Broadway.
no, yeah, he was the original, and I credited that place with making me a New York City comic because they had the room that you know at the 23rd at the Gramercy, but they also had a little side room there. So we had two
Oh,
rooms there, and
oh,
that
okay.
room was physically, not an easy room. It
Yeah.
had you looked, it was very narrow. You looked straight out at a mirror, so you got to see yourself doing well or bombing, but it had a mirror, and then it only had like one row in front of you. And then people were off to the right and people were off to the left. And so you had to like really engage with that whole room. It was very joke to joke, and it was very like, you know, very, very New York City,
Mm. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, that place was, I mean, there was a moment in time for a few years where it was when you worked on the weekend for New York, you had two shows at Broadway because he owned Broadway, and then
Mm.
I'd run in between to do the show at New York. And there were a few weekends like this, but when you were a a comic at that time, there was this check spot at these rooms that were pretty rough because it was about 5 or 10 minutes of them taking care of the checks. And I remember there was a certain point where it was like the bigger comics were like, I don't want to do that. And so I remember having one weekend where I had that closing check spot, and the other comics were Greg Rogel, Mitch Fatel, and Jim Gaffigan.
Oh, wow.
Just like kill, kill, kill. And then I'm going up not only after these three like heavy hitters, but doing the check spot. And
Wow.
a crash course in really figuring out how to do comedy like that.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's funny. One of my stories about Gaffigan was I was doing a showcase and he did a pop in and we were taping the showcase and um, is it Jeff Lawrence? You remember Jeff Lawrence?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So he was running the show and then he was going through the lineup and he's like, "Hey, listen, Gaffigan just popped in and we're gonna put him up." And it was like I was going to go up after Gaffigan. I'm like,
Yeah.
Jesus Christ, how am I going to, I'm just
Yeah.
trying to figure out this craft. How am I going to go up against after
Yeah.
this guy? And then, luckily or unluckily, he got pretty upset because one of the tables got really rambunctious.
Yeah.
And he was like, I'm not going out there until you get rid of them.
Yeah.
So he kept the show rolling. And then, luckily I got to go up, we changed the order a little bit. So I didn't have to,
Yeah.
suffer the consequences of trying
Yeah.
to,
Well, it's a double-edged sword. Not a double-edged sword. It's actually an interesting thing with that because like we have been talking about, those big, you know, famous comedians that come in, they're trying out new material most of the time in those instances. So people get so worried that that's different than like what I was just talking about because that was like 15 years ago or something where they were all just going in and killing as well.
yeah,
Um, but when they're going to try new material, it's almost better to go up after somebody like that
yeah, yeah,
because the audience is so happy that they just saw them, but they're not ruining the room for 25 minutes, just crushing the room for 25 minutes because they're trying out new stuff. So there's still some laugh left. In fact, I don't know if you know this, but Hinged, Seinfeld did a set the night I taped that album, that
I do
special.
know that because you
Yeah.
referenced it a couple of times in there. At one point, you were looking
Yeah.
at the water, like, was this
Yes.
Seinfeld's water or not? Because
Yes. Yes. So what happened was, I think Gotham is pretty much Jerry's favorite place to
yeah,
work stuff
yeah.
out.
That's because of
Um,
Lee, I think. It was at Mazzilli,
yeah. Um, so the Friday before that, I was at the club just for a regular Friday night shows, and Seinfeld came in and went up before me. And, I'm a comedian that's like, I feel good after a set if it goes well, but I remember having like an amazing set that I like texted my wife or called my wife. I was like, oh, that was good. Like that was like, I wish I had taped that, blah, 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 blah. But, everything's cooking. And the following Monday, I remember my parents were visiting. So I was over at their hotel room. Um, and Chris Mazzilli, the owner of Gotham, called me and he said, do you mind if Seinfeld comes in on, I think it was Tuesday night that we were doing the special, or Wednesday night, to do a set beforehand? It was more of a formality. What am I going to say? No.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
like, it didn't send me on a tailspin because, like I said, he had just done this. I had just done this with him on Friday, and like I said, it puts them in a great mood. They just saw Seinfeld, but he didn't take all the laughs because he's working on stuff. So it ended up being, fantastic. And then also, as a comedian that's like has a hard time, pushing myself on other people, I could really give people like a, you want to come to this, wink, wink. I couldn't obviously say that he was going to be there because that's, what if
Yeah,
he didn't show up? Also, that's not what he's looking for.
right, right.
Um, but I told a few extra people like to come. Trust me, just come to the first show, trust me. And yeah, it worked out. It was the interesting story is do you know who um why am I don't know if I should tell this story.
Yeah, yeah, we don't have to do that then. Yeah.
Okay. All
There
right.
was one time, and I won't say the comedian's name, but this comedian sort of knew my friend pretty good and worked with him quite a bit, and I knew this guy. And this comedian said to my friend, "Hey, listen, you want to go to Gotham tonight?" And he's like, "Why?" And she's like, "Well, number one, I'm performing," and he was like, "Well, yeah, cool, definitely, I'll be there." And he's like, "You definitely want to come early." So he was like, "All right," and he's like, "Hey, did you want to go to Gotham and hang out?" She told me to come on, or the comedian told me to come
Hmm.
in. And I was like, "Yeah, sure." So what happens? We get up, and then Gaffigan shows up,
Yeah.
which is pretty wild. And I've seen him a bunch of times, which is really kind of cool. And I really
Yeah.
love Gaffigan.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, Gaffigan goes, "Hey, I just want to bring up this next person. They're kind of young in comedy. Who knows what they're doing, but I just want to introduce them." And he's like, "Jerry Seinfeld." So we,
Yeah.
the two of them, and this is
Yeah.
years ago before they
Right.
started touring together. They both
Right.
popped into Gotham, and then this
Nice.
went on. So yeah, it's you never know what's going to happen
Yeah.
in the city. So it's all good stuff. And you're right. I mean, they were there was a one point where Gaffigan, and he's not, I've seen him do this before. He pulls out a little piece of paper from his back
Yeah.
pocket and he goes through a couple things. But yeah,
Yeah.
and Seinfeld did a funny thing. He's like, "Yes, I know." He's like, and this is before they were bagging cameras and everything else like that.
Yeah.
He said, "I know, I get it. Take out all your phones, get your pictures in, and then put them away so we can work." And
Right.
yeah, it
Right.
was cool stuff though.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, on this journey that you're on, obviously family comes up for you. You definitely have this care, this empathy that really sort of exudes out of you. And I almost, pick up so this work ethic, and I think people don't really give enough respect to the work ethic that comedians have, because it really is quite a bit. And I don't know if those things resonate for you.
For sure. Yeah. It is. It is. Yeah, first two for sure. The work ethic thing is, yeah, it's that's a battle to claim for myself too, because it doesn't always, you know, like I host a lot down at the Comedy Cellar, and um sometimes it's easy peasy, but sometimes it's like, where's this next comic? I got to go up, do like time until they get here. This is a new person. I got to, do this, do that, and but my wife's also been there when it's just easy breezy, and like to her, sometimes it just looks like you're just, going and
Winging
having
it,
fun and
whatever.
eating
Yeah,
hummus. So yeah, there's like the work ethic thing. Even when it is hard work, you're trying to make it look like it's not when you're up there, you
yeah,
know?
yeah, yeah.
So it is that, and then it's like, well, what do you do all day? It's like, well, yes, I do have the freedom to, do whatever I want, but I also need to carve out the time to write, and it's almost harder because it's self-inflicted deadlines and
Yeah, yeah.
stuff
Well,
like that.
listen, when I mention the hard work, I don't just mean your ethic from a stage perspective.
Mm,
You're a father who has two beautiful
yeah,
kids. Look at all the stuff that you're doing. You're moving, you're doing all these things. It's not easy And I remember that time in my life when I had two young, you know,
Yeah.
my old two were 18 months apart, and the between my middle and last one, it's about same thing. So the first two were two
Okay.
years apart, and then 18
Okay.
months, the
Yeah.
old Irish twins thing. So,
Yeah.
you know, I remember those days. Uh,
Sure.
they were very, very difficult. So,
Sure. It's
and for
hard, but also the best. The best. And
yeah,
I did struggle with being able to not um devote as much as I was to comedy. But Judy Gold told me, she said, comedy's not going anywhere, but this time is with the kids.
oh
So
wow,
yeah,
she's amazing. She's another person
yeah,
I'd love to be able to talk to about this stuff.
just
She's
she's
unbelievable.
yeah, she really is.
Yeah, but I was gonna say that um, from the family perspective, it does seem to get easier as time goes on. But you're
Sure.
right. You never get those days back when they're young. So it's pretty incredible stuff. So you know, as we wrap some stuff up here, and I don't want to take too much of your time. If I had to ask you, like, who are some of your heroes as you were growing up? Who would you think they would be?
Well, I mean, right off the bat, my parents, um, I always looked at that like, excellent parents. Like my mom was always like, she's a teacher, special ed teacher, so she was, I remember I have a vivid memory of some of my friends going to like aftercare programs and I wasn't, and I'd be like, "Mom, I want to go. Why don't you go to work longer so I can go to after work pro?" But like she made, she had a career where, and she was, I think that's what she wanted, to be there as much as she could for us after her school, so I didn't have to go to the aftercare program or something. But my dad, a retired optometrist, worked at VA hospitals his entire career, was a dean of optometry at the College of Optometry that he went to in New England, College of Optometry, but still coached my teams and still, when that wasn't, when it got like later where, um, he couldn't, but he would still make it to games and, just involved and just good. So yeah, definitely my parents. As far as like in comedy, you want to know?
Whatever you want to tell me. If you got heroes
Uh,
and comedies, I'm happy to hear that as well.
yeah.
I'm sure people
I
would
mean,
love to
I
hear
just, you know, I do remember. Well, I remember uh, my dad and I used to watch comedy together. There was a guy, Dennis Wolfberg, Seinfeld, Roseanne. They were these comics that kept coming up on in shows that I really love. But yeah, there was, so many um, influences that I had. Um, but I don't know. I guess my grandfather too. My grandparents were amazing. Um, um, yeah,
That's cool. Thank you. So if anybody's listening to this and they go back and they listen to Spiraling Up or In the Tank, um, what would be one or two key takeaways you would want somebody to come away from this podcast with?
from my podcast.
For this conversation,
Oh,
or
this
even
conversation.
as they're listening to stuff like that, what would be
I
one or two key
guess.
takeaways that you would want somebody to
I guess go to therapy would be good. I think that, or a healer that has been previously a CIA agent. Um, no, I think something that you said really resonated was, even if I said something, it made me think that this is what you were, um, even if you know what the things are, your core values, even if you say that you have them, you might, it's the behaviors too that go along with it. So it's like we can say we want something, we could say, um, that this is a goal or this is the way I want to live my life. But yeah, that's only half the battle. It's
Yeah,
back it up with the behaviors as well.
cool. Thank you. If people wanted to reach out and touch base with you, or if they're interested in maybe somebody hears this, they want to do a corporate, or if they just want to get some more
Yeah.
info, or what would be the best way that people can find you?
My website, jonfisch.com, JONFISCH. And as my grandfather says, you can't have the fish without the sea, which which I have tried numerous times to get involved into a joke of mine, but the joke has never stuck. That is it's a good side joke there, but it's never fit into it. And then yeah, my Instagram handle is probably where I'm mostly at if you want to find out about shows, JD Fish.
JD Fish. Very cool. Well, hey, listen, I can't thank you enough for this. It really means a lot. And especially you're the sort of the first person outside of that business realm that I think really can help people understand what this type of work means and how it impacts what we do. So I really can't thank you enough for this. And hopefully we
Ah,
get another opportunity to do this when you got another special coming out or something else coming
awesome.
out.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
You got it. Thanks.